Chapter 8. Continental European Monetary Systems. 1. The Netherlands Plakkaats, regulating the flow of specie. In the golden twilight of the 17th century, the Dutch Republic stood as a sprawling, watery colossus of commerce, a place where the salt-crusted decks of East Indiamen brought the world's treasures to the damp quays of Amsterdam. Yet this emporium of the world faced a silent, metallic chaos. The Republic's success had turned it into a magnetic vortex, sucking in a bewildering anarchy of foreign coins, worn Spanish doubloons, clipped French écus, debased German guldens, and 1,000 other ghosts of currency. To the Dutch merchant, a coin was not a symbol of royal glory, but a suspect piece of merchandise that had to be interrogated for its truth. To end this disorder, the States General issued the Plakkaats, heavy, authoritative edicts that functioned as the monetary Bibles of the Dutch age. These Plakkaats were far more than mere legislation. They were vivid, descriptive catalogues of the world's metallic sins and virtues. Posted on the walls of town halls and the pillars of the Bourse, they featured intricate woodcut illustrations of every authorized coin, detailing with unforgiving precision the required weight down to the last ace or grain. A merchant would consult the Plakkaat as a priest might consult a liturgy, using it to navigate the treacherous waters of specie-flow. The edicts mandated that all accounts be settled in a theoretical, unvarying unit, the bank guilder. This was a stroke of genius. While the physical coins in a man's pocket might be bad, clipped or worn, the bank money recorded in the ledgers of the Amsterdam Wissel Bank was good, backed by the idealized standards set forth in the Plakkaats. The descriptive power of the Plakkaats transformed the very nature of gold in Northern Europe. They stripped the myth from the metal. In the dimly lit counting houses along the Herengracht, gold was no longer an emblem of divine right, but a commodity to be weighed on precision scales of brass and bone. The Plakkaats were the first to formalize the Assayer's eye as a state function. They institutionalized the practice of tolerance, the tiny margin of acceptable wear, and set harsh penalties for those who dared to sweat or shake the gold to steal its dust. This was a world where the smell of ink and old parchment met the cold, metallic tang of the weighing room. Furthermore, these edicts were the primary tools used to manage the drain of specie. Because the Dutch East India Company required massive amounts of silver and gold to trade for spices in Asia, the Plakkaats acted as a regulatory valve. They determined which coins could be exported and which had to remain to lubricate the domestic economy. The Dutch did not seek to hoard gold in the primitive Spanish fashion. Instead, through the Plakkaats, they sought to curate it. They created a market so transparent and so rigorously regulated that gold flowed toward Amsterdam as naturally as water flows to the sea. The Plakkaats were the intellectual scaffolding of the modern world's first truly global financial center, proving that in the battle for economic supremacy, the sharpest weapon was not the sword, but the accurately calibrated scale. 2. The French Reform of 1803 and the Law of Tender. In the wake of the French Revolution, the nation's financial landscape lay in a state of smoldering ruin. The assignats, the infamous paper currency backed by seized church lands, had collapsed into a hyperinflationary abyss, turning fortunes into kindling and shattering the public's trust in any value that was not physical. It was into this vacuum of confidence that Napoleon Bonaparte stepped, not merely as a conqueror of nations, but as a restorer of order. Under the Law of 7 Germinal, Year 11, April 7, 1803, Napoleon orchestrated a monetary rebirth that would anchor France for more than a century. He sought to replace the revolutionary chaos with the cold, mathematical certainty of the franc germinal, a bimetallic system that established a rigid and ambitious relationship between silver and gold. The 1803 reform was a masterpiece of legislative architecture. It defined the franc as 5 grams of silver, but its true glory was the reintroduction of gold as the supreme instrument of the state. This was manifested in the 20-franc gold piece, universally known as the Napoleon. Struck from 6.45 grams of 0.90 fine gold, the coin bore the stern, laureated profile of the first consul, later emperor. To hold a Napoleon was to hold the very essence of the empire's stability. It was a coin designed to be felt. The sharp, milled edges and the deep, resonant ring of high-purity gold providing a tactile rebuttal to the flimsy, worthless paper of the previous decade. At the heart of this reform lay a profound evolution of the law of tender. Napoleon did not merely suggest the value of his gold, he commanded it. The 1803 Act decreed that the Napoleon was unlimited legal tender, meaning it had to be accepted by every citizen and creditor in the discharge of any debt, no matter how vast. This was the state imposing its will of metal upon the market. By fixing the ratio between gold and silver at exactly 15.5 to 1, France attempted to legislate a natural harmony between the two metals. However, this law turned France into a monetary sentinel for all of Europe. Because the French mint was open to all, any global shift in the market value of gold or silver would immediately hit the French borders, forcing the nation to absorb whichever etal was undervalued. The French reform of 1803 was more than a fiscal policy. It was a cultural aesthetic. The Napoleon became the standard of the European bourgeoisie, a golden anchor that survived the fall of empires, the restoration of kings, and the rise of republics. It proved that a nation's credit is inseparable from the honesty of its mint. Napoleon's law of tender created a golden peace in the French counting houses that lasted until the catastrophe of 1914. Through this reform, gold ceased to be a tool of royal whim and became a structured legal entity, a shimmering testament to the idea that even the most revolutionary of states must eventually bow to the discipline of the metal.
3. German Mint Conventions, from Dresden, 1838, to Vienna, 1857. Before the iron hand of Bismarck forged a unified empire, Germany was a fractured mosaic of kingdoms, duchies, and free cities, each clinging to its ancient right to strike its own image in metal. To a traveler in the mid-19th century, crossing from Prussia into Saxony or Bavaria was a journey into a thicket of monetary confusion. One might carry North German thalers only to find them weighed and discounted against the South German Guldens. In this landscape, gold was a rare visitor, appearing only as foreign guests like the British sovereign or the French Napoleon. The German mint conventions were the grand diplomatic stages where these fragmented states attempted to clear this Specie-Fog and speak a single language of value. The first major milestone was the Dresden Coinage Convention of 1838. In the shadows of the Saxon court, representatives from the Zollverein, the customs union, met to harmonize their disparate systems. Their achievement was a stroke of pragmatic genius, the creation of a common coin, the Vereinsmünze. This was not yet a gold standard, but a disciplined silver bridge. The Dresden edicts mandated that 2 Prussian thalers should equal 3.5 South German Guldens. This was the first time that the disparate German peoples agreed on a shared fineness of metal, turning their coins into a unified economic army. The sound of the minting press in Berlin began to harmonize with the one in Munich, creating a domestic stability that prepared the Germanic heartland for the Industrial Revolution. The culmination of this process arrived with the Vienna Monetary Treaty of 1857. This was a majestic attempt to link the Germanic systems with the vast, multi-ethnic Austrian Empire. The treaty established a common weight standard based on the decimal metric pound, 500 grams, abandoning the ancient and confusing mark weights of the Middle Ages. Although the German world remained officially committed to a silver standard, the Vienna Treaty introduced the gold krone, the crown, as a trade coin. The gold krone was a shimmering herald of the future. While it did not yet have the legal tender status of silver, its high purity and standardized weight made it the preferred medium for the burgeoning railroad and telegraph companies. These conventions were essentially treaties of peace between rival treasuries. They proved that monetary order could be achieved through negotiation rather than conquest. By standardizing the silver units, these conventions unconsciously cleared the intellectual and technical path for the eventual adoption of gold. The meticulous ledgers and assaying protocols established between Dresden and Vienna transformed the German states from a collection of medieval mints into a sophisticated financial engine. When the time finally came for the imperial unification in 1871, the golden mark did not spring from a vacuum. It was the final, inevitable fruit of decades of diplomatic labor and metallic calibration. 4. Formation and history of the Latin Union. In the mid-19th century, a vision of borderless Europe shimmered across the counting houses of the Mediterranean and the Alps. This vision took physical form in 1865 with the birth of the Latin Monetary Union. Orchestrated by France and joined by Belgium, Italy, and Switzerland, with Greece following shortly after, the Union was a majestic attempt to harmonize the continent's wealth under a single metallic standard. The goal was simple as well as profound. Any gold or silver coin struck by one member state would be accepted as legal tender in the treasuries of all others. A traveler could leave the cafes of Paris with a gold 20-franc piece, cross into the Piedmont, and buy a bottle of Barolo with that same coin, now recognized as a 20-lira piece, without ever visiting a money changer. This was the age of the international franc. The Union adopted the rigorous standards of the 1803 reform, fixing the weight and fineness of their gold and silver coins to a common denominator. The gold 20-unit coin, be it franc, lira, or drachma, became the lingua franca of Southern Europe. To hold an LMU gold coin was to feel the weight of a unified civilization. The designs might vary, featuring the stern profile of Napoleon III, the bearded countenance of Victor Emmanuel II, or the Swiss Helvetica. But the gold within was identical. It was a shimmering promise that commerce could transcend national rivalries, and that a unified currency could pave the way for a United States of Europe. However, the history of the Latin Union is also a cautionary tale of the struggle to maintain bimetallism in a shifting world. By tying gold and silver together at the rigid ratio of 15.5 to 1, the Union became a target for global market forces. The discovery of massive silver lodes in the American West began to flood the world market, driving down the price of silver. Under the Union's rules, this cheap silver flowed into France and Italy to be minted into coins, while the good gold was hoarded or exported to London. The Union found itself in a defensive crouch, forced to limit and eventually suspend the free coinage of silver to prevent its gold reserves from being completely drained. Ultimately, the Latin Union was haunted by the lack of a central political authority, a monetary heart to match its metallic body. While the coins were unified, the fiscal policies of the member states remained fiercely independent. Italy's appetite for debt and Greece's economic instability put constant pressure on the Union's gold-silver equilibrium. By the time the German Empire adopted the strict gold standard in 1871, the Latin Union's bimetallist dream was already limping. Yet, for several decades, it provided a glimpse of a golden integration that would not be seen again on the continent for over a century. It proved that gold could indeed unify nations, but it also warned that without political unity, the discipline of the metal is a fragile bond. 5. The unification of the German imperial system, 1871 to 1873. The birth of the modern global gold standard was not a quiet evolution, but a thunderous geopolitical event triggered by the iron and blood diplomacy of Otto von Bismarck. Following the decisive Prussian victory in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871, the newly proclaimed German Empire sought to cement its status as a world power. The instrument of this transformation was the astronomical war indemnity of 5 billion gold francs extracted from defeated France. This massive tidal wave of French gold, shipped across the border in heavy wooden crates, provided Germany with the literal fuel to abandon its centuries-old silver tradition and construct a state-of-the-art monetary system from the ground up. Through the landmark acts of 1871 and 1873, Germany formally demonetized silver and established the gold mark. This was a seismic shift in the European financial landscape. For the first time, the Germanic heartland was unified not just by a Kaiser, but by a single high-purity gold coin, the 20-mark gold piece, featuring the imperial eagle in the stern visage of Wilhelm I. Struck in the fires of nationalistic triumph, these coins were the physical embodiment of the Second Reich's industrial ambitions. This move was a deliberate monetary ambush against the British sovereign's dominance. By adopting a strict gold monometallism, Germany was signaling that it was no longer a collection of provincial principalities, but a direct competitor to the British Empire. The German unification of gold had a devastating domino effect on the rest of the world. By flooding the market with its discarded silver and hoarding gold, Germany forced the Latin Monetary Union and the United States to face a grim reality: stay with silver and face devaluation, or follow Germany into the Golden Gate. This triggered the infamous crime of 1873 in America and compelled France to shut its mints to silver. The world was suddenly divided into gold nations and silver nations, with the former representing the industrial colonizing elite. The German mark became the engine of a new kind of warfare, a financial one, where the strength of a nation's credit was measured by the depth of its gold vaults in the newly established Reichsbank. Ultimately, the unification of the German imperial system was the moment the classical gold standard became truly global. It turned gold into the undisputed world money. From the shipyards of Hamburg to the steel mills of the Ruhr, the gold mark provided a stable, predictable baseline for the greatest industrial explosion in European history. However, this golden triumph also sowed the seeds of future conflict. By linking the world's major economies to a single, scarce metal, Bismarck had created a system of immense efficiency, but also immense rigidity, a golden straitjacket that would hold the world together in prosperity, only to shatter with catastrophic violence in 1914.